Hello, third grade friends. Thank you for taking the time to look today at our art lesson. The year is wrapping up really fast, and I am so thankful that we have one more opportunity to do a fun project with Mrs. Deer's class. So, those of you that don't remember me or don't know me, I'm Dagny's mom. I'm Erin, and I am the art docent for Mrs. Deer's class. So, we have done a few lessons all through our Zoom days. And this lesson I'm recording to you with you today. And so make sure that you pause when you need to pause and you complete the activity. I think this is going to be a fun activity. So today we are going to be looking at tessellations. Tessellations are something I really enjoy because I, I'm a math teacher. Um, and I have always done this with my students at the end of the year. This idea of tessellations. We used to do ceiling tiles with my eighth grade math students. It was the way to end the eighth grade year. Students would create tessellations on a ceiling tile and then it would be placed on the ceiling in the school. And so our school was filled with these tessellation ceiling tiles. It's a really fun project. So I thought we could take that concept and put it into a space that's a little bit smaller for us. So let's talk about what tessellations are. This is an example of a tessellation that you see on the slide. So a tessellation is a pattern made with polygons that completely fills a space with no gaps, spaces, or overlaps. So if you remember, you've been doing some geometry at home, and a polygon is any shape that has at least three sides and is closed in. So when you think of shapes like triangles or squares or rhombuses, parallelograms, but also we can think of shapes that don't necessarily have a traditional name. Um, and we see tessellations everywhere. So oftentimes you can see them in tiles. If you have tiles on your floor or wood floors, you have tessellations. They might not be in the prettiest of patterns. Our wood floors are just planks of wood, but that's a tessellation because it's a shape that repeats and it doesn't have any spaces or gaps and nothing overlaps. You can see it in a soccer ball. You see we have the hexagon or the pentagons that are overlapping on top of themselves that create that round ball shape. Tessellations are seen a lot in nature too. We have an example here of a honeycomb that bees create. So we have that repeated pattern. And then you can think of puzzles. Puzzles are often seen as tessellations as well because they are just repeated shapes that we put together to create another shape. So tessellations are kind of everywhere, and they can be seen in lots of fun ways. If we want to talk about somebody who's very well known for tessellations, we would talk about MC Escher. And if you look at, there's a picture of the artist and some of his more famous works, you might see that you've seen some of his drawings before. So Escher was born in the Netherlands. He was born June 17th, 1898, and he died also in the Netherlands, March 27th, 1972. So he lived a nice long life. He stayed in the European area for most of his life. He was a graphic artist that became very well known in the 1960s after a publication in Scientific America. A lot of artists that we think of today as being very popular didn't start off of being necessarily as well known when they started their work, but something usually happens to kind of push them in the right direction. And for Escher, it was his understanding of math. Mathematicians really, really were drawn to Escher. And even though Escher was not a great student in school, he did not have some really high level understanding of mathematical concepts. He was really drawn to these math concepts, these ideas of infinity and reflection and symmetry and hyperbolic geometry and tessellations, which is a form of geometry that we look at. So you can kind of see this idea. If you've looked at some of Escher's drawings, you can see that it's sometimes paths that kind of seem to lead to nowhere or come out of nowhere. He was quite good at that type of concept. We we look at tessellations came about whenever he visited a couple of different architectural structures. So early on in his career, he was really drawn by nature, but as he traveled around, especially to Italy and Spain in the 1920s and 30s, he saw a lot of architecture. And something that is very well known is that when he visited Alhambra, which is a 14th century Moorish castle near Granada, Spain, that he saw the intrinsic mosaic art that was given or built into this castle. And he kind of just was incredibly inspired by it. So there are some pictures of the detailed artwork on your page, and we have pictures of what Alhambra looks like. And then we have the drawings that he made based off of those inspirations. This really began his work into tessellations because these are tessellations too. They are repeated patterns of polygons, and they don't have any space in between them. They're pretty complex. He went on to make lots of versions of tessellations. So some of them, if you look at some of these pictures, maybe you've seen some of these before, and maybe you haven't. But Escher is a very well-known artist when it comes to this type of graphic design. So we see kind of a horse or a Pegasus type of structure. I really like this middle picture that's in the black and white. It starts off at the bottom of the page in this kind of abstract tessellation that kind of grows into a man running down the stairs. And then you'll notice that the stairs kind of seem to go from nowhere, and you have some tessellation of the tile work in the building as well. So there's some unique properties there. I really like the ones that have the lizards that are the tessellations. You see the three different colored lizards, and they all mesh together because of the way that he has built in reflection and rotation into that shape. And then the tessellation of the fish that transforms into a bird is also pretty neat. So if you haven't seen Escher, I encourage you to look at some Escher drawings. He has some pretty neat designs. Today, we are going to create our own tessellation. So what you're going to need is white paper and then the brown square that was provided to you. This is a 2-inch by 2-inch square. So if you need more, and I think there's enough that you got a couple extra, but if you should need more, it's 2 inches by 2 inch, and it's made with a little bit thicker paper. You are going to need some scissors and some tape. You will need a pencil. You'll need your markers, crayons, or colored pencils, whatever you choose. And then you'll need a black Sharpie or a marker. Now, if you don't have tape, this can be challenging. So I would encourage you to try your best to think of ways that you're going to be able to paste together these pieces. And you'll kind of see as we move along. If you have some stickers, stickers might work really well. They're just like tape. Okay, so pause, make sure that you have all of your materials, and I'm ready to get started when you are for our tessellations. Okay, so step one, we are going to take our brown piece of paper and we're going to make a design from it. Now, to do this, you are going to draw two simple shapes on the two adjacent sides. So if you draw one on the one side, you're going to draw the other one on the bottom. And they have to go from corner to corner. So I'm going to show you what I drew. Here's my design. Okay, and you're going to notice that I drew from corner to corner, and I just drew a design. And then I drew another design on the adjacent side, not across, right next to. And again, it goes from corner to corner. Okay, so once you have drawn those two designs, and there's so many opportunities for you to decide what you want it to look like. These are very abstract, but you can try to make them into something if you want. And if you're not particularly happy with the first time you draw it, flip it over and try again. And if you feel like after you've created it, it's not quite what you wanted, that's why I gave you a couple of extra, hoping that that would be enough for you to do. This is kind of a challenging part. So after you have your designs, you are going to cut those designs out. Okay, so you cut along the lines. You're going to start by cutting one design out first, and you're going to move it off to the side. So as the picture shows, it says carefully cut out one side and slide it, oops, I'm sorry, and slide it all the way to the other side. That's where you're going to tape it. So you're going to cut out your design with your scissors, that's what they're called. And you are going to take that little piece that you cut out and slide it over to the straight edged side across from it. Okay, so I called it at the corresponding side. So you have your shape cut out, and just the way that it was cut out, I don't want to turn it or flip it. I'm just going to slide it over, and I'm going to attach it to the other side. When I do that, I'm going to have to attach it with tape. Okay, if you don't have tape, again, I encourage you to be creative on how you do this. I would suggest possibly if you have some stickers somewhere, or if you need to try to use glue, that might work, but I don't want it to get too sticky. You also want to make sure that you attach it exactly on so that it meets the corner to corner. If it's a little off, it's gonna kind of elongate your design. So I cut and I attached one side, and I'm gonna do that again. I'm gonna now cut this bottom shape that I made, and I'm gonna slide it up to this top piece. Okay, so make sure that you get this done. Again, I want you to pause. When you pause, I want you to draw and cut and move the pieces over. This is going to be your template for your shape, for your tessellation. And you can play around with this quite a bit, because if you work at designing something that makes something that's completely different than what you thought it would be, I think that's pretty fun. So again, remember, once you cut it out, you're not flipping it or turning it, you're just sliding that piece over and you're taping it onto the other side. Once you've done that, you have your template. Your template is your tessellation. And it looks weird right now. It doesn't look like anything to me. Maybe it looks like something to you. But I have this design. Okay, so that's step one. Step one is creating your template. Go ahead and pause if you need to. Once you've created your template, let's go to the next step. Okay, so step two is tracing this. You are gonna take your piece of paper, that's your white paper. You're just gonna put your new template anywhere on the page, and you're gonna trace around it. It can be hard to do. I kind of have to hold it down in different places so that I can trace all the way around it without it moving around. And if you have lots of little zigzags, it can be hard to trace. Okay, so you're going to trace around it. Once you've traced all the way around, you're going to slide it up or down or off to the side until it's right up against the original one, and you're going to trace it again. Okay, so you don't want to have any gaps. I would suggest that you definitely use a pencil for this, because it's going to happen that you're going to make mistakes. When I did it, I made mistakes, and I've done this project many, many times. So you're going to be filling up the entire page with your template shape. Okay, you're going to go all the way up across your page, and you're going to go all the way down. Sometimes you're going to see that when you get to the edge of your paper, not all of your tile or your template's going to fit. Just trace around the parts that do, and then it looks like it's kind of going off the page. You don't want to leave anything around the page blank, because then you might get a little confused on what goes where. So sliding, never rotating, never flipping or reflecting. This is only a slide that we're going from one to another. It's called a translation. So we are translating our template to create this repeated pattern. Try really hard not to have any gaps. Sometimes we twist the template a little bit, and if you see that it's not quite matching up, it's okay to kind of adjust and make one up maybe a little bit bigger so that it feels like it's going to stay filled in. Okay, so work on this. This will take a while. So take your time, trace around it. If you found that the template that you made might be a little too hard to trace over and over again, go ahead and go back to step one and you can try to create a new one. If you want to try to create something a little bit more simple, go for it. Okay, so once you have finished and your entire sheet is covered with your tessellation, we'll be ready to move on to the next step. All right, next step, coloring. So we're going to color our tessellation now. Now, my suggestions to you on this is it's best to choose 3 to 4 colors. If you want to choose more than that, go for it. But the idea is that the tessellation next to each tessellation should not be the same color. So you want to create something that where no sides share the same color. You might have some points that kind of share, but you don't want the sides to be right next to each other to be the same color. Okay, so you're going to be coloring all the shapes and you'll color them and it'll take a while. If you want to use crayons, you can. If you want to use colored pencils, you can. If you want to use crayons or markers, that works too. Um, I would say stay away from paint because that tends to make it pretty hard, especially with some of these sharp lines. And if you think that your a little tessellation that you've created, if it looks like something, like I have a picture that looks kind of like a monster. So this person went ahead and made little ears and little teeth and little eyes and little paws for each of its monsters. You can do that too. You kind of decide because, a lot of what I do for our art is to give you as much opportunity to use your own imagination. So if you see something in your art that calls to you, go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is going to take a while. Pause as you need to, and we'll go to the next step afterwards. Okay? Okay, so this is our last step before we share. As you can see, I've colored all of my tessellations. I have them all colored in. I used 4 colors. None of my sides are touching. I might have some corners that are pretty close to each other, but I've managed to get all of them set up. And you can see kind of the edges of the paper. You're going to notice that there's just like a little peekaboo of some of the colors because that's where the tessellation kind of slid off the page. So you have this beautiful piece of work that hopefully you're really proud of. My last thing is that you need to go back and you're going to outline each tessellation in black. That's where you need that black marker. And I showed you the side-by-side comparison. I wanted you to see how much more of a pop your tessellation has when you outline it in black. So that was the first picture is my original. And then the second picture is once I outlined it in the black marker. Look how much it pops out. I really like this tessellation. So I hope that you have enjoyed creating this piece of art. It's Escher inspired. The last thing I want you to do is to make sure that you share it. I really, really enjoy seeing all of your work. It has been so much fun getting to see your work on Zooms, and I'm going to miss that so much. I hope that you all have a wonderful summer and that 4th grade will be a wonderful experience where we're going to get to see more of each other. Okay, have a wonderful summer. Bye.